So for this video, I'm gonna go over some of the more awards-friendly movies that have come out in the last couple months, and I'm gonna try to go through as many as I possibly can. Some I may go more in depth with, others I may not. I'm gonna try to do this as quickly as possible, and here we go. So the first movie up was Till, which I saw all the way back in October, and this movie is about the mother of Emmett Till, who obviously her son was lynched, and she is grappling with everything that's going on with that and the trial and how she became a civil rights activist afterwards. So I did not review this movie at the time because I didn't know how to approach the movie, and I just don't know how to approach how I feel about this movie, because I do think this movie is impactful. I do think this movie is incredibly powerful, and it's a movie that everyone should see. And I don't know how to convey that, unfortunately. But here's what I will say. Danielle Deadwyler was phenomenal in this movie. She was incredible. There is a scene in this movie towards the end where it's a long take. It's just her. It's just a close up of her face, and she's just crying. She's just talking about her son and how upset she is and how angry she is about everything, and it's perfect. Also, Jalen Hill, who plays Emmett Till in this movie, I thought he was really good. I thought he was very charismatic, and it was very horrifying to know that this was not going to end well, and it just made me feel worse knowing that that was going to happen to him. And also, the only other person in this movie that I thought was really good was Haley Bennett, who I thought was pure evil in this movie. I hated every second of her when she was on screen, and I think that was the intent of the role. And I do like the emotional aspect of this movie. You do feel the anger and just outrage over everything that's going on, and you're angry because you realize, in the past few years, it hasn't really gone away, unfortunately. And I thought the movie just did a really good job at that. I guess my only complaints about this movie are most of the supporting actors in this movie don't really do much for me, but it's mostly Danielle Deadwyler, who just controls this entire movie. She is phenomenal. It's not an easy watch, but it's a movie that people need to see. And I think it's one of the most important movies you will see. Because Danielle Deadwyler is just so good in this movie, I will give this 3.5 out of 4 stars. See it. Next up is Tar, which was written and directed by Todd Field, and it's the first movie he's done in 16 years, interestingly enough. So it stars Cate Blanchett as this composer who clearly has a lot of issues, and there's this full balance between trying to be perfect and being this monstrous person. And this was a movie I was only looking forward to because I'm a big fan of Cate Blanchett, and this was just going to be a movie which is just going to be an entire showcase of her. And Cate Blanchett is amazing in this movie. She just controls this movie. She is scary. She is dark. She can be very funny at times in this movie too, surprisingly. And strangely enough, I did not feel bad for her throughout this entire movie. The score and the sound design in this movie are very fascinating as well. The cinematography is also really good. There's this one scene where she's teaching a class, and it's entirely in one take, and it's a 10-minute long take, and I'm like, when is this going to end? And also, it kind of makes you think about, where people are and, where they're thinking, where their thought process is, and, why they think it's a good idea to do really awful, disgusting things. And I thought the movie did that really well as well. As far as anything I didn't like about the movie, well, Cate Blanchett is so good in this movie. Some of the other actors don't really get too much to do. The actress who plays her wife in the movie, she didn't really do much. Mark Strong's also in the movie. He didn't really do much. And also, I didn't really care for the fact that this movie was almost it was a little over 2.5 hours. And normally I try to say, well, no movie is too long or too short. So I feel like this movie could have been tightened a little bit. It can be a little repetitive at times, but it's definitely worth it if you're a fan of Cate Blanchett and her work. This is an entire showcase just to her and her acting. I'll give Tar 3.5 out of 4 stars. See it. Next up is Armageddon Time, which was written and directed by James Gray, and it's about this kid who's growing up in the 80s, and he befriends this African-American kid, and when he gets into trouble, he's sent to a private school, and basically learns about growing up, learns about the systems and such, and stars Anthony Hopkins, Anne Hathaway, Jeremy Strong, And this movie, I remember walking out of it thinking, well, that wasn't too bad. That was actually quite good. But the more I kind of thought about it, the more I kind of didn't like it. So the acting overall, the only actors who do a good job in this movie, in my opinion, are Anthony Hopkins, who I thought was tremendous in this movie. He keeps giving out really good performances. And also Banks Repeta, who plays the main kid in the movie, I thought he did a really good job as well. And I thought there were a lot of interesting topics with. I thought that how they handled certain themes in this movie were interesting. How they handled prejudice and privilege, I thought that was very interesting to talk about. And I kind of liked its old school feeling to it. Like, it kind of definitely felt like it was a movie from that era. And I felt like it didn't really rely on the nostalgia of the 80s, but it just felt like it was a movie from the 80s. Now, I didn't really like a couple things in this movie. First off, Jeremy Strong. Great on Succession, but man, was he bad in this movie. He does have an interesting speech towards the end of the movie, but for the most part, it just kind of felt like he was doing a Ray Romano impression. It was awful. Anne Hathaway, she wasn't bad in this movie by any means, but she's just not great. It's kind of more of a, I don't know. I guess this movie was filmed during COVID, so it's like, okay, I just want to get out of the house. Let's just do this quick, and I'm not really going to try, unfortunately. I didn't also really care for the actor who played the African American kid, not because I thought he did a bad job, but I felt like the movie didn't really do well with him. It's like, I felt like he was more, not really a character, he was just more of a plot device rather than like a actual character. Like, I felt like if the movie kind of added him a little bit more to the story instead of just having him be just a random person in this movie, it would have been a little bit better. Also, the movie has some famous people in it from a very infamous family that's really weirdly popular still. And don't get me wrong, I would criticize this family too, but why are they in this movie? It just feels random. It's like, at what point, like, why? Like, it makes no sense why they're in this movie. I don't know, like, again, I keep repeating myself. But Armageddon Time was a movie that I thought was good on the first viewing, but maybe upon thinking about it afterwards, I don't like it as much. It does have a lot of interesting topics to discuss about how, there's prejudice and there's privilege in the world, and I feel like I just feel like it could have been better given the subject matter, and I feel like I know where it could have been fixed, mainly with the relationship between the two kids. That would have been a lot better. I'll give Armageddon Time 2.5 out of 4 stars. Stream it. Next up is the Banshees of Inisherin, which stars Colin Farrell, Brendan Gleeson as two friends. When Brendan Gleeson decides that he doesn't want to be friends with Colin Farrell anymore, it starts this whole rift between them. So this was a movie I was looking forward to because I like Martin McDonagh's work. I loved Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. This is a reteaming of his co-stars from In Bruges, and I also really like Seven Psychopaths. So I knew this movie was going to be interesting because of Martin McDonagh's involvement. And this movie is really good in my opinion. It is. The performances in the movie, particularly by Colin Farrell, Brendan Gleeson, Barry Keoghan, and Carrie Condon, are all fantastic in this movie. You kind of understand where everyone's coming from in this movie. You kind of just understand, like, how they feel, like, how they interact with people. It's really good. It can be really funny throughout. There are moments where I was laughing, even though I may not have understood a lot of the things they're saying because it takes place in Ireland. And that may sound offensive, but I'm sorry. It's kind of hard to... I found myself laughing throughout this movie, and it can be pretty emotional throughout. I thought the emotional aspects worked. It wasn't like, overtly incredibly funny or incredibly emotional. It kind of just blends the comedy and the sadness of this movie pretty well. And I do like a lot of the ideas in this movie that are presented. Your place in the world, how, doing something with your life that's meaningful, how you are with people. I thought how all the themes in the movie worked pretty well for itself. And this movie kept surprising me throughout, and I was just really glad that I didn't really know anything going into it. And also, I kind of like how Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson kind of just interact with each other through this movie. And like how they... this may be a spoiler, but like how they kind of like appear at the opposite ends by the end of the movie. I thought that was very interesting as well. I guess if I had any complaints about this movie is that if you thought by the trailer it's going to be a really fun, dark comedy, it's not. It's not a fun movie. It's really not a fun movie. It's funny, but it's not a fun movie. It can be pretty sad. I guess the best way to describe it is like, if you're expecting something like In Bruges, because it has those two stars in it, it has Martin McDonagh involved in it, you're probably going to see something more like Three Billboards, because that movie was, it had funny moments. It was not a fun movie. And I feel like that's a better comparison with this. So overall, I'll give Banshees of Inisherin 3.5 out of 4 stars. See it. Next up is She Said, which was a movie that stars Carey Mulligan and Zoe Kazan as two reporters from the New York Times who broke the scandal of Harvey Weinstein. And this was a movie that it sounded intriguing, and it kind of seemed ironic because it looked like it was going for all these awards, and at the same time it's about the mega Hollywood producer who was producing all these Oscar bait movies, and realizing how much of a horrible person that he was. I was intrigued, but also was kind of nervous how this movie was going to go. And the performances in this movie are pretty good, particularly from Carey Mulligan and Zoe Kazan, and also from Patricia Clarkson. I also thought she did a really good job in the movie as well. Also, I kind of like this little detail. They never actually show Harvey Weinstein's face, and I actually like that little detail. And if I had to say anything about the movie that I didn't care for, is that, I don't know, this may sound horrible, but I just felt like there was just no surprises and just no moments where it's like, this is all settling in and realize like what's going on right now. I feel like maybe because like when I heard about the Harvey Weinstein stuff, I'm like, yeah, I just heard all this horrible stuff and it's just coming out every day. It's like, and the movie kind of just regurgitates all the stuff, and it's like, yeah, this is horrible what he did. This is evil. This is just disgusting. This is just horrible what he did. And I just felt like the movie didn't do too much, and like really, what's the word that I'm really looking for in this? I guess there was just no wow moment, like realize how deep it went. Like there are a couple lines where it's like, oh, it is pretty deep, and like how horrible Hollywood treats women and how sexual abuse just goes all the way to the top. I just felt like there was just no moment where it was all settling in, where it's like it's bigger than we realized. And despite that, I do think the movie is really well acted, particularly from Mulligan and Kazan and Patricia Clarkson, that given the subject matter, it is kind of worth seeing. So I'll give it 3 out of 4 stars. See it. Next up was Bones and All, directed by Luca Guadagnino, starring Taylor Russell, Timothy Chalamet, and Mark Rylance. Taylor Russell plays a teenage girl who is actually a cannibal, and when she accidentally gets into trouble for being a cannibal, she has to run away. She meets all these kooky people who also have been cannibals, like Timothy Chalamet, like Mark Rylance. And this was a movie I was not looking forward to because of the premise. I just feel like, how can you turn this movie about cannibals into like this romance? And it just seemed so weird to me. And Luca Guadagnino, which I haven't really seen a lot of his films. I did see Call Me By Your Name, which I like, but at the same time, it's pretty problematic. And it's just so uncomfortable that I just don't think I can watch it again. I say I respect that movie, not that I would watch it again. But overall, I do think this movie is very interesting, and I think it is worth watching. The performances are really good. Taylor Russell, who's really good in this movie, I thought she was really good in Waves. I thought she was really good in this movie as well. I liked her chemistry with Timothy Chalamet, surprisingly, in this movie. Mark Rylance, he's really creepy in this movie, and I loved his performance. Mark Rylance is one of my favorite actors right now, and I think he gives a really disturbing performance. It's phenomenal. The cinematography is great. The score is interesting. I kind of like how it feels like a different movie each time, where like the beginning you kind of just forget what this movie's about until like it happens about 10 minutes in. I kind of like that with this movie, where it's like it kind of just changes so often that it kind of wants to be a little bit of everything. And I was like, there were a lot of surprises about this movie too, but the biggest surprise was that a lot of the cannibalism stuff was actually not as bad as I expected. Okay, well, you don't really see it, you just hear it, which I think might be a little bit better. It might be better for some people, but maybe not. I don't know. You hear a lot of it, but you don't really see it. If I had to say there were any issues with this movie, is that there are some pacing issues. It's a little over 2 hours. And also, I felt like the movie had a few too many endings, where it felt like there were a lot of scenes where it felt like, oh, this is how this movie... Okay, so this is how it ends. Oh, it's going to continue. Okay, so this is how it ends. Oh, no, it's going to continue again. Okay, so this is how it ends. And eventually it does end, but It kind of felt like they were trying to figure out like which ending to put up, and they decided let's just put a whole bunch up and see what works. I don't know. It just that's the way it kind of felt to me. I do think it's an interesting movie, just as long as you can get past the subject material to kind of like go in and see like this different type of movie that's trying to be a little bit different in a lot of ways. Where it's well acted, it may creep out a lot of people. Admittedly, it did for me at first, but I kind of just let it go. I thought the acting was great, the production values are great. I just would have tweaked the ending a little bit more, and I would have just tightened up the pace a little bit. I'll give Bones and All 3 out of 4 stars. See it. And the last movie I'm going to talk about in this video is Devotion, which was directed by J.D. Dillard and stars Jonathan Major and Glenn Powell. No, Jonathan Majors and Glenn Powell. They are two Army pilots, and during the Korean War, they form a bond, and that's pretty much the movie. This was a movie I was kind of looking forward to because I thought the trailers looked at it really interesting. And I kind of was hoping that this movie was going to do a lot better because I thought that trailer was really good. Sadly, it's not doing so well. But the performances by Jonathan Majors and Glenn Powell are really good. I really enjoyed their bond throughout the movie. And by the end, I kind of just really believed it. The aviation scenes are also pretty stellar. They're not as good as something like, say, Top Gun Maverick, which that's going to be compared to a lot because it also has Glenn Powell in it. But they were pretty interesting as well. It's a very emotional movie. A couple of the actresses in the movie did a really good job too, like the actress who played Jonathan Major's wife. She did a really good job. Also, surprisingly, the actress who played Elizabeth Taylor in this movie did a really good job. I guess the only issues I have are, again, the pacing. This movie could have been tightened up a little bit. And also, I didn't really care for the other pilots in this unit. I felt like they could have done a little bit more. They kind of like wanted to strengthen up the whole idea of like this brotherhood, this kinship, despite our differences. And they don't really do a whole lot with a lot of the side characters, unfortunately. I kind of would have liked it a little bit more if they just added them just a little bit more to the story. But it was mostly about Jonathan Majors and Glenn Powell. They were really good together, and I enjoyed this. It's kind of hard to say I enjoy this movie because it's definitely another emotional movie. This is another well-made movie. This is like if Top Gun Maverick was actually legitimately trying to go for like all the awards and such. I guess that's the best way to describe it. So I would give Devotion 3 out of 4 stars. See it. So I got a lot of plans going on right now with movies. I got a few more reviews I kind of want to do. I still want to do a whole bunch of Marvel stuff after Black Panther, including a spoiler take, ranking of Phase 4, and ranking of all the Marvel movies and the TV shows. I got a lot going on, so I'm going to do what I can. Also want to do a throwback review for a movie that has a sequel coming out very soon after a very long wait. That's all I'll say. So what'd you think of any of these movies? Comment down below. Subscribe to the channel. This is Pat. Stay safe.